Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. And I'm here to do podcasts. Won't be our first, won't be our last. The subject of the story is very vast. Hope you like it and you won't be aghast. Other words that rhyme with cast. Let's do a show.
Man, I just kept going and going.
I enjoyed it.
It was, my homage to the beginning of the film we're about to talk about.
Yes, so we are talking about the films of 1967 in this season, and we've arrived at our documentary pick, which features Mr. Bob Dylan. It is Don't Look Back from D.A. Pennebaker, and a little taste there of the brilliant Bob Dylan impression that I'm sure is going to recur throughout this episode.
Of all my impressions, that's clearly number one. And of all the Bob Dylan impressions, that's probably as good as
right? Obviously.
But what I'm referencing is the opening sequence, where he does Subterranean Homesick Blues, and he's got the note cards, and we've seen it throughout pop culture in so many ways. And that's a forerunner to the music videos of the MTV boom.
That it is. Yeah, you see that the first thing in this movie, and that really just captures your attention immediately. And something that has been relentlessly sort of copied and parodied. And one of those classic movie moments that you're so, even if you've never seen this, that you probably are so familiar with that the impact of the actual moment is lessened in a bit. I don't know. That's something that happens for me with a lot of classic movies that I think we've talked about before, that if it's something that's permeated pop culture so much, you can't have the sort of pure reaction to it anymore. You're just waiting for it to show up.
I kind of liked it though. I mean, and it gets you really, it does a good job of getting you into the spirit of what we're about to see. And also, who's standing there in the background talking to someone, but we never reference him. Do you know who it is?
It's Allen Ginsberg, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying I didn't like it. I'm just saying that I think the impact of it is sometimes less. And that goes the same for famous lines that show up in other movies and things like that. So this film documents the 1965 tour that Bob Dylan undertook in the United Kingdom when he was already, really hugely popular, sort of beginning his massive popularity that continued to this day. Really, it's kind of amazing.
He's an icon, man.
That he is. And Pennebaker followed him on that tour. This movie, I couldn't figure out how well it did at the box office. I mean, I feel like as popular as Bob Dylan was, this kind of film is probably not like a movie that's going to be huge at the box office anyway. The figure that I found is that it grossed $27,158, which is a very specific number that I'm not sure is accurate.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and I don't know either, but this could just be one that Pennebaker toured around, and, obviously it's still got a major audience. So, there's no doubt this thing's made a lot of money over time. But
yeah, and it was re-released in theaters. And this is the kind of thing, too, that, obviously home video didn't exist in 1967, but as soon as it did, it's the kind of thing that people will have as part of their collection if they're Bob Dylan fans.
Or D.A. Pennebaker fans.
I think there are more Bob Dylan fans.
But in D.A. Pennebaker's defense, you could say that about many people, that there are more Bob Dylan fans than X.
True. But I just think that documentaries of this type, music documentaries, something capturing a particular tour of the musician, is something that fans will typically want to own and watch again.
I agree, and I'm a big fan of this genre when done well, and obviously if it's a performer I'm interested in.
Right, and I am the opposite, is that even when it is a performer that I'm interested in, I tend not to watch these kinds of movies. We talked about this a bit in our episode on Stop Making Sense, but yeah, it just doesn't engage me. This isn't a pure concert movie like Stop Making Sense. There's a lot more to this, but it's still just these kinds of movies I don't particularly engage a whole lot with. But this is clearly like the template for so many of them.
Right. This is it, man. You do one, you got to watch this first.
That you do. And it was generally well regarded by critics, but of course, as is often the case with these older films, it's amusing to see the reaction at the time and how we can kind of look at it, how it turned out. And of course, Bob Dylan was very, very popular, but he was very young and he was kind of the hot young thing at the time, and people didn't realize what he would become. This is like somebody reviewing a Justin Bieber movie right now or something like that.
Ay, ay, ay.
So Roger Ebert, who was himself young at the time, was clearly a fan of Dylan's music, but maybe not the way that he was presented in this film. Ebert said, "Don't Look Back is a fascinating exercise in self-revelation carried out by Bob Dylan and friends. The portrait that emerges is not a pretty one. Indeed, those who consider Dylan a lone ethical figure standing up against the phonies will discover after seeing this film that they have lost their hero. Dylan reveals himself, alas, to have clay feet like all the rest of us. He is immature, petty, vindictive, lacking a sense of humor, overly impressed with his own importance, and not very bright. Dylan's songs give a deeper, more honest impression of their author, and I don't think this movie should detract from them. When Dylan sings, he has hold of something precious. It is only his pathetic private life, as he has revealed it in this film, that should be dismissed or regretted." And I think Ebert is a little harsh on Dylan there
Yeah.
for someone who he clearly admires as a musician.
Yeah, it's almost like he's disappointed in what he saw of Dylan the person and just had to lash out against him or something. But I didn't get that. Like he said he's not intelligent. There's nothing in the movie that would make you think that Bob Dylan is not intelligent.
I agree. I mean, I think if anything, Dylan seems quite canny in this film and that he knows what he's doing when he is sort of being combative with these reporters and stuff. And as we'll get to here, like in a later review, I mean, he knows he's on camera. He knows this movie is going to be released.
Yeah.
He's very famous, and he knows that this is part of sort of his public image that he's in the process of crafting.
Right. And he clearly does have a sense of humor, another thing that Ebert said he doesn't have there. And then lastly, I mean, as I was talking to my dad, who is an old hippie and loves this music and everything, how much of it is real and how much of it is Dylan putting you on?
Right. And I think that's the case in a lot of documentaries of this type going forward to today, is that these people who are in the business of crafting images for themselves know that they're on camera and they're going to behave in a way that works for whatever image they want to create.
Right. Wasn't that was like literally the whole point of that Joaquin Phoenix one from a few years ago, right?
Oh God. Yeah. I'm Still Here.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
Yeah, you shouldn't. It's terrible.
Okay, I won't.
But yes, that was a movie that I think was widely known to be fake at the time. But I'm talking about movies even in which everything is, quote, real, but at the same time, everyone knows. I mean, and this is like a reality TV thing too. You're on camera, you're going to behave in a way that is how you want to be portrayed on camera.
I mean, once you're on camera, right, that's the whole thing that anyone says. You're never going to get something 100% honest at that point anyway, because you're on camera. So
right,
what you get is what you get. And I think Dylan was having fun a lot of the times with the medium and wanted to present himself as kind of a brute in some ways.
Yeah, and Ebert is treating this as if Pennebaker somehow like snuck in and captured Dylan in these unguarded moments and revealed him to the world, and that's not the case at all.
I agree, but it is a compliment to Pennebaker because he is so good as like this fly on the wall type with this camera.
He is. So in an even more ironic take, Donald J. Hennahan, who was the music critic for the New York Times, reviewed this film, and he said, "It will be a good joke on us all if in 50 years or so, Dylan is regarded as a significant figure in English poetry. Not Mr. Thomas, the late Welsh bard, but Bob, the guitar-picking American balladeer. One step toward the latter's canonization has been taken, in fact, in a full-length documentary, Don't Look Back. It is an absorbing film. Whether one is a member of the under-30 set that regards Mr. Dylan as a spokesman, or one of the vanishing Americans over that age, this look into the life of a folk hero is likely to be both entertaining and occasionally disturbing. Mr. Dylan parries and thrusts with interviewers, some of them impossibly square, of course, and therefore perfect targets for the put-on. He doggedly and sullenly resists attempts to probe his psyche. If he has ideas, he hides them. He and his pals can have fun, but it is a special hip fun that always threatens to turn to anger." So he feels like he's, sort of on the outside looking in here, but is sort of appreciative of that, I
Yeah,
guess.
he kind of gets it at least, right? It is interesting because this is, the time of that culture war, hippies, free love, and, that kind of more conservative, silent majority, so to speak. And I guess that's kind of what you're seeing here with Dylan. Also, you got to note, Josh, 1965, this is right before he went electric at Newport, right? So this is like a seminal moment, or that is a very seminal moment, but this is like when he is the king of the folk music scene, right? And when he did go electric, there were those boos at Newport because they're like, you're betraying folk music, blah blah blah. But he was evolving and becoming different with his music, more of a rock star, I guess. So just want to put that in the time and place of when this was filmed. So when people saw it, he had already gone electric and become an even bigger star.
Right. And I think even within the context of this movie, there's that moment when Pennebaker is kind of playfully alluding to Dylan's increasing rock starness. And some interviewer, I think, asks him a question about, like, where did it all start for you? And Pennebaker cuts to this footage of Dylan playing an old folk song for like farm workers.
Yeah, it's for a voters' rights rally in 1963. I think that's a great sequence. But
Yeah. I mean, but I think sort of the implication there in a way, and then we cut back to him being this superstar, is he's even strayed from those roots. And not that Pennebaker is criticizing him, but sort of just demonstrating the evolution of Dylan over this short amount of time.
I mean, so that's from Greenwood, Mississippi, Voters Rally, 1963. The song he plays is Only a Pawn in Their Game, and it's him surrounded by a lot of black farmers, I'd say, right?
I think that's what it is. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm going to disagree with you there because, any rock star can still take up any cause. And I mean, Dylan's taken up plenty of causes as a rock star. Look at the Hurricane, the song The Hurricane, which helped free Reuben Carter from prison for a murder he didn't commit.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that it demonstrates how the distance sort of that he's come in that period of time. He was standing surrounded by a handful of people at this rally playing a song, I think that's not even a song that he wrote necessarily, right? It's just a traditional folk song. And now here he is as this voice of the generation playing these giant sold out halls and stuff. Not to criticize him or say that he has sold out, but just to show sort of the amazing rise in this short period of time.
Okay.
So Andrew Saris in The Village Voice spends a lot of his review talking about Dylan and about that generational divide. And he says something about how he's over 30, but he feels like, essentially the kids are all right. He doesn't say it that way, but that they've got better taste now than, the people who listened to Perry Como back in the day. But the segment I wanted to quote here relates to the idea we were talking about just a little bit ago about the documentary form and whether it's fake or what's being played up. So he says, the camera can capture only that truth that chooses to exhibit itself. If there were nothing of the exhibitionist in Dylan, the camera would register a blank. Many truths are hidden from the camera, and this is a fact that too many makers of documentary refuse to face. The great ideal of the documentary movement was to tell the truth about everything, but the truth was often lost in a collection of external details. The highest art of the cinema consists of relating what is shown to what is not shown, and of defining essences in terms of surfaces. Pennebaker's mock passivity before his plastic material does not alter the fact that Dylan is performing in front of a camera. What Pennebaker records is not Bob Dylan as he really is, whatever that means, but rather how Bob Dylan responds to the role imposed upon him by the camera. Compared to most of the public figures of his time, Dylan responds very well indeed. So he's respecting Dylan, but I think acknowledging, like we said, that this is part of the image-making process of Dylan as a rock star.
I think that's fair. And, like we had already addressed, like once a camera's on you, as little as it might be, you're going to act a little differently no matter what.
Right. I mean, and I think documentary-wise, we talked about when we talk about Pumping Iron, for example, which was a movie that was accused of contriving a lot of its elements. I mean, all of the people shown in that movie are clearly playing up parts of their personalities so that they can get camera time or get the audience to be enamored of them.
Well, he's also here, Dylan's playing with the idea of celebrity. And who's to say he doesn't do this all the time? Like maybe fans come up to him or, people who check him into hotels and he's always messing with them. That could just be the way he has fun and like kind of deflates to some type of normalcy.
Right. And we all we can know is what we see in the film, what Pennebaker chooses to show us. And as with any documentary, as we've also talked about a lot, he shoots hundreds of hours probably of footage if he spent all his time on tour with Dylan to distill it down into this 90-ish minute movie. And so there's a lot that he leaves out. And he, as well as Dylan, has chosen a sort of image that he wants to construct of his subject.
Right. You're crafting the narrative.
Yes. Yes, indeed. So as I would say, would you say you're a fan of Bob Dylan, Jason?
Yeah, I'm more of a casual fan, but obviously as we've noted on this podcast, I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan, and I think there's a very easy connection to make and the influence from Dylan to Springsteen and the mutual respect they have for each other. So I like a lot of Dylan songs, and obviously you can't, whether you like him or not, like as a lyricist, you have to acknowledge just what an amazing poet he is.
Apparently Donald J. Hennahan does not think so. But so I mean, had you seen this film in your education on Dylan?
I had never watched it all the way through, but I'd seen a good amount of it, I'd say, before. How about you?
No, I had not. I mean, I may have seen that opening, the Subterranean Homesick Blues sequence, which, as you said, is essentially like one of the first music videos, and I think has been shown on its own apart from this movie a lot. But no, I had not seen this, and I'm sort of neutral on Dylan, I guess. I can respect how important he is, and as you say, a great lyricist, and has written some amazing songs, which I tend to like more in versions performed by other people. But yeah, I mean, I was certainly aware of this film and, familiar with a lot of his music. I saw Bob Dylan in concert actually when I was in college, just because it was like something to do.
Oh, how was that?
It was fine. I'm sure I didn't appreciate it as much as I would. And the thing about Bob Dylan touring was that at the time, and I think still, I mean, so this would have been in maybe 99 or 2000 or something that I saw him. And he doesn't, as we see in this movie, he does not give a fuck about anything. And so, he would play. It's not like he went out there and played his greatest hits like a lot of kind of classic rock artists would do. And so I went to that concert and I might have known like one song that he played or something like that. I don't remember specifically, but so it was just kind of and he doesn't really say anything in between songs. So it was just kind of an experience that washed over me. And then I could say like, oh, well, I did that. I saw Bob Dylan. That's like a thing that is good to do. But I think I was more, this is sad with my musical taste, but I think it was Natalie Merchant who opened. And I think I was more excited to see her.
All right. Well, hey man, that's you.
Yeah.
I saw Dylan guest with Springsteen at Chase Stadium. They played Highway 61 Revisited, and like it was such a huge roar in, New York, and people loved it, but it wasn't, I don't think either of them would say it was the best performance in the song. It was more loose and jangly and just like, here's a nice special guest moment type thing.
Right. That's still a cool thing to sort of say that you've seen, that you were there when that happened. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And of course, Natalie Merchant covered Because the Night, sung by
Bruce Springsteen. Yeah, that's a great version of that. That's by 10,000 Maniacs.
Yeah. So Dave, what's your history with Bob Dylan other than the curly hair?
Yeah,
both share.
Yeah, no, I've always loved Bob Dylan, but I also am more of just a casual fan. I don't really listen to his albums that much. I just love a lot of his songs. But I did also, similar to Josh, I saw him once in concert, and it was a similar show to that where it was like, I don't think I knew anything he was playing. I don't think he played any of the hits, and it was just like, well, I'm at a Bob Dylan concert, so that's cool.
Right. That was, I think, exactly my attitude toward it. And it was, when I was in college, and it's a small college town, and basically any concert that came to town, it was like, we should go see it. Yeah. So that was what we did.
What's crazy though, is he's written so many well-known songs. I would wonder if like I could go to a concert and only recognize one. Like, it feels like you would recognize more. Like Josh and I saw John Fogerty a few times, and like, of course he plays more hits perhaps, but you forget like this dude's written so many well-known songs that like you forget how many well-known songs he's written.
But Dylan is so prolific that he's written like I would, 80 to 90% of his songs are not well known. And he doesn't seem to differentiate in terms of what he chooses to perform in concert.
All right.
So
Yeah.
I don't remember. I'd have to try to find the set list and what specifically he performed and which songs I knew, but I definitely just remember it was all kind of a blur.
And this was this performance with the full band, rock, and both of you guys, there was not an acoustic interlude or anything? Or
I mean, there might have been an interlude, but overall it was a full band performance.
Yeah.
So, but I'm sure he still does some songs from those early times when it was just him and a guitar.
Sure,
but again, I would not have necessarily known which ones were which at the time.
All right. Good enough, sir.
Yeah. So any other background on this film that you want to mention, Jason?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the tour took place from April 30th to May 10th. So it wasn't even that long of a tour, really, you know? And I think that's really the only fact I want to mention right now. But I'm sure we'll talk about more things in our next segment, Josh.
We will. We'll come back in a moment and talk our general thoughts on Don't Look Back. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1967, we are talking about our documentary pick, Bob Dylan in Don't Look Back. And for me, at least, as I established, these kinds of music documentaries, I just kind of don't really have much of a enthusiasm for. And so watching this movie, I felt like mostly this is interesting in a way that you can see how influential it was, but it just kind of was whatever to me, a lot of it.
Well, like you said, it's not a full concert film. There's so much stuff that's more candid. I thought that you might respond to that differently.
I mean, I think I probably liked or was more interested in that than I would have if it was just a full-on concert film. But I don't know. A lot of it is just because it's so familiar from so many others. You're like, oh, here's the backstage antics. And I think one of the things is that this movie is known, I mean, as those reviews emphasize so heavily from the time, this movie is known as this film about Bob Dylan being an asshole. And I think I was ready for these crazy scenes of him just tearing into the press or whatever. And it's really not so much that. I feel like it's a lot of it is more playful, is just him being kind of goofy for the sake of the camera or for the sake of his image. And maybe, again, because we've seen that in other music documentaries, or that we expect music, pop stars or whatever to have that kind of combative attitude toward the press or to be, image making at the time. I felt like that aspect of it was so subdued that it was almost disappointing.
So I didn't get that person. I kind of liked the way he sparred with them and everything. And what you're really seeing is just him keeping them on their toes, right? Like they'll ask him a question and he'll just throw it like right back at him. There's that whole sequence towards the end where he's like, the interviewer's like, what do you want people to know about you? And he's like, what do you want people to know about you? Or whatever, however it is. Like,
yeah,
why should I want to know you, man? What do you bring to the table? And
yeah,
I kind of liked all that stuff. I did like you said, you're seeing like a superstar develop, and how just even in a time where media wasn't as readily available, like just what a sensation he was, and there's so much stuff that's a bit anachronistic and weird. Like Joan Baez is on the tour with him, but never plays music other than like in the hotel room with him.
I think she was his girlfriend at the time, and that's why she's on the tour.
Yeah, maybe. But and you're probably right there, but it's you would think if you bring Joan Baez on tour with you, you would at least have her open for you then.
I don't know. I mean, and she gets to play some songs in these backstage sequences, and obviously she's quite impressive. She's got a great voice and a more traditionally beautiful voice than Bob Dylan has. So and I feel like for me too, one of the things is that, I mean, obviously on purpose, this movie just dumps you right into the action, and there's no explanatory text on screen. There's no voiceover. There's no direct to camera interviews, and Pennebaker is just putting you right there in the moment. But as someone who knows who Bob Dylan is, but isn't necessarily familiar with these other people, I felt like I was at a loss a lot of time. I felt like the journalist in this movie who asks Joan Baez how to spell her name and then is embarrassed that he didn't realize she was Joan Baez. And I would not have realized that she was Joan Baez either, except he asked her to spell her name.
No, I think that's totally a fair criticism. Like, you want Pennebaker to just put like little titles up underneath them just to say like who they are, because you're getting like Marianne Faithfull, John Mayall, Alan Price, Ginger Baker. I mean, I knew who Albert Grossman was, who's his manager, and they do introduce him a little,
Yeah,
but like,
you get the idea that that's Bob Dylan's manager.
yeah, I
Yes.
mean, and even like I think Pete Townsend is there for a second or whatnot. You kind of want to just, hey, just put a title card like underneath or whatnot. And then also, yeah, that there's so much, and I kind of like this segment a lot. Talk about Donovan as like the new Dylan, and that's every young singer songwriter who ever did well after Dylan. Is he the new Dylan, right? And Donovan is catching fire, but they never actually tell you who. Like when Donovan's on screen, they don't even tell you that it's Donovan, right? And that could have been helpful to viewers, I think.
Right. Well, I mean, I think, and I'm not necessarily offering this as a criticism of the movie, but just sort of giving you my perspective, because I think at the time, all of those people were super famous, and that anyone who saw this movie would know who they are. I mean, again, it's like if you make a movie about Justin Bieber right now or whatever, and he, walked backstage and there's Taylor Swift, we don't need the movie to tell us this is Taylor Swift.
No, I disagree. I think you do. I mean, because now you're saying the documentary is only there for people who know, but I think the form of documentary is often for people who want to learn about different things.
Well, right, but I'm just saying it's a legit approach, and he's far from the only person to approach documentary filmmaking that way. And I think there are other documentaries that are not about instantly recognizable famous people that still will do this and will require the audience to sort of use context clues to figure out who is who, and it's a legit way to approach things.
I just think like, look, would you have known who Alan Price was?
No, I wouldn't, but would people have? I mean, I guess it was also a really big deal that Alan Price had recently left the Animals, right? And Dylan asks him something about that. And again, it would be just like some big pop star news of the moment right now if it happened in a movie.
But Alan Price wasn't Eric Burden. He wasn't the lead singer of the Animals, right? So he wasn't the face of the Animals. So when you're talking about Taylor Swift now, you're talking about a megastar in the age of social media, right? Whose face is going to be plastered all over the internet every day. I don't think Alan Price or any of these stars were ever going to get that type of thing because it wasn't as readily accessible. And now if you're talking about, someone who's a band member as opposed to the face of the group, then I think you do want that context there for you.
Well, I mean, I as established, I did want it, but I think that, and we can't know for sure how people reacted at the time, but I feel like people who saw this movie at the time would be much more likely to know who that is and to know the story. I mean, no, there's no social media, but they're reading NME or whatever it is. I mean, some of the press that Bob Dylan reads in this film, and these were clearly people who were covered very extensively in the press, obsessively in a way. I mean, they make that joke about the article where it says like, is Donovan abandoning his fans or something? And then someone is like, Donovan's only been around for 3 months.
Yeah, that's funny.
People are paying that close attention to him. It's just in a different format than social media. But I mean, I will say, for example, I watched the recent Billie Eilish documentary, and whether Billie Eilish and Bob Dylan are equivalent is not really the point. But the point is that at the moment, she is the equivalent of what Bob Dylan was at that time. And I'm vaguely familiar with her, but not intimately. I don't know all of her songs or know everyone in her inner circle. And that movie does exactly what this movie does, which is just puts you right there alongside her. People flit in and out, and it doesn't tell you who they are. And one of them is Justin Bieber, but who I do know who that is. But a lot of them are people that I didn't know. And watching that movie, I was like, I'm not sure if I should know who this person is. But if I were a big Billie Eilish fan and followed everything that she does, I would know who this is.
Well, I just think, having watched a ton of music documentaries, I like it better when I know everyone. Any type of documentary, I want to know who it is. And I'm not saying you need to put an arrow and follow them around, but like at some point, give me the context.
Yeah. I mean, I would prefer that too. I just think that it's a legit approach to not do that.
Okay. I mean, it's a minor quibble in the grand scheme of things.
True.
I think there's so much good stuff in here that it's minor. It's fine. Like Donovan, the whole Donovan stuff which is a runner throughout the whole movie. Is he going to be the next Dylan and this and that? And you're talking about how he's presented as like an asshole, how Dylan is. And they have this thing where, Donovan's in the hotel room and he sings to Sing for You. And then Dylan sings It's All Over Baby Blue, which is like one of my favorite Dylan songs. And at the time, I think it was recorded as like, well, here's Dylan one-upping him. But the way it was cut together, it doesn't show that like they asked each other to sing, right?
Right. I think it does show that, or I got that sense when Donovan finishes. I mean, first of all, you have Dylan saying, like, oh, that's a great song to Donovan. And then I think he says, Donovan, like, oh, would you do It's All Over Now, Baby Blue? And then Dylan does because he's been requested to.
Okay. Do you think, because we're talking about people putting on airs for the camera, when Albert Grossman just yells at the hotel staff, I thought all of that was just like, hey, I'm a big shot and I know the camera's on me and I'm gonna act like a big shot. I don't think that was like a real portrayal of what would have happened.
And maybe not. I mean, and Grossman, at least as much as Dylan is, I'm sure, aware of the myth making going on. And, he wants his client to be sort of perceived in a certain way. And so if he can, as the manager, act a certain way to do that, then, it's any moment in this film, I would believe, was something that they kind of thought of in advance to do as something that would be what they want in the film.
Grossman's a very interesting character. There's that sequence with him and Tito Burns, who is a old British musician turned like musical agent, where they're negotiating a TV appearance for Bob Dylan. And I was like, I could watch a whole documentary on just the deal making and Grossman kind of going and building his client up like this.
See, and that's one scene where I was like, I don't need this scene. It just kind of goes back and forth with them negotiating. I mean, it seemed like a very basic, they're trying to get to a fee or whatever, and they're going back and forth and making phone calls. And it just, to me, it was not particularly exciting. But I mean, I can see its value in the film too, because especially in a way, if you're like, oh, Dylan is this pure artist or whatever. But here's what happens behind the scenes is his manager like nitpicking small amounts of compensation for him to get a TV appearance.
Yeah, doing his job is what you mean.
Well, right. I mean, not that it's not important, but if you have this idealized sense of Bob Dylan, it shows you that like also he is like any other musical artist, and has a business side.
Dave, any thoughts?
I mean, to me, the big thing was that it was just awesome that this footage exists, and that's kind of the draw of any of these kind of documentaries, I guess, but especially to go back to Dylan, like right at this particular moment in time, like you were saying, right before going electric and all that. It's just cool to watch that. But at the same time, I don't think there was anything that particularly was that exciting that happens in it, which was, I think, kind of the negative for me.
I think Dave might have liked the part the best where they're running down the hall and there are all these corridors, and that's the famous Spinal Tap spoof. Right.
Yeah. I definitely thought of Spinal Tap during that scene.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, what you're saying, there's nothing that exciting. I think the point is like the performance is supposed to be the excitement, right? That's what it is there for.
Those are my favorite parts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever he's performing, or even the other people are performing, those are my favorite parts of it.
Did you have a favorite song in there?
Not particularly. I mean, just that era of Dylan. I mean, it's all so good,
And I would argue that maybe the fact that nothing exciting happens is also part of the point.
Sure, yeah.
That this is how it is to be on tour, that you're just kind of hanging out backstage or talking to annoying people that you don't want to talk to or whatever. That's what the life is.
Right. And that's kind of why I liked all that like stuff that wasn't on stage. I did like a lot of the songs. Like I said, I'm a big fan of It's All Over Baby Blue, Times Are Changing. There's a lot of good stuff in there. It Ain't Me, Babe. And, he even has like some humor in there where like he's calling out Donovan or, doing stuff like It's All Right, Mom, Only Bleeding. Right. But the stuff that I found interesting was like, where he's at the reception and like, that's like clearly a big stodgy scene and they're in the corner, like beat poets snapping along to the piano of, the more proper player. I like the sequence where Joan Baez is just singing and he's there typing, and maybe that's staged, right? But it kind of gives you the, as Josh, as you said, he's so prolific. It kind of gives you the feeling that like he's always working on something there. So I like that a lot in the interaction. Like we said, this was a different time, right? Did hotels even have TV? Did hotel rooms have TV at that time? Probably, but like
I don't know.
It wouldn't have been what we have now with a million channels, right? So there was just all this hanging out and like, I'm not going to call them parties, but like after,
sure,
after group hangs and everything. I liked all that stuff. I thought it was really a good look into it. And the way Grossman shoots, like we said, is that kind of verite, fly on the wall. I'm going to let whatever happens happen type thing as non-intrusive as possible. I thought that was effective, not just for the backstage stuff, but really good for the performances.
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't a performance documentary, and a lot of the times when he shows Dylan on stage, we don't get the whole song, or we get a different focus. I mean, there's a fun sequence where we see the techs backstage where things aren't working, and they're frantically trying to get
That was great.
Yeah, trying to get everything properly turned on. And Dylan obviously does not give a shit, and he is just playing the song anyway, even though no one can hear him. So yeah, I mean, that's cool. And that sequence that you're talking about with Dylan, where he's typing while Joan Baez is singing, and I think there was some criticism of that as in the sort of Dylan is an asshole perspective of like, oh, she's performing this beautiful song and he's ignoring her. But to me, that showed the sort of like casual nature, and like, they have this relationship. And that's just what happened. She performs, she sings beautiful songs all the time. And it's just, that's what happens. They're hanging out, and he's writing a song on his typewriter or whatever he's writing, one of his million memoirs. And I like that for sort of the casual. It didn't seem to me like he was being rude to her.
I don't think so either. It's just two artists working on their art in the same space.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. And whether that was staged or not, that was the impression that I got of it.
Another thing that I liked was just kind of watching it and thinking about whether or not the whole messing with the media that Dylan was loving doing so much, that's something that so many artists nowadays, still do. And I just was wondering if this is where it comes from. If they watched this and said, I want to do that like Dylan,
I mean, maybe, or even if they didn't watch this, that it became a thing to do because of this.
Sure.
I think going back to like Andrew Sarris's reference to people like Perry Como or whatever, I think pop stars were expected to be much more nice and polite prior to the 1960s. And that part of Dylan and the whole generation of 60s artists was the idea of not doing that.
But other types of artists might have been doing that. Maybe not pop stars, but certainly I don't think he's the first guy to ever be combative in a playful way with the media.
True. I mean, you could talk about visual artists or whatever. I mean, painters and people like that, or poets, or I don't know.
Right.
But I think especially pop artists, popular music artists were expected to sort of follow the rules and do what they're told because they're all part of this big machine. And artists really started rebelling against that a lot at this time, in part because they were, Dylan is a singer-songwriter. He's not just an interchangeable voice performing someone else's music. He is the whole package, and he can control it. I mean, and the same with the Beatles, they can control it more because it's about them entirely.
The Who? Oh, the Beatles.
And the Who also.
And the Who. Yeah. No, I mean, this is the birth of, artists, I guess, controlling more of their work, like you're saying.
Yeah, I think so, or at least is part of that. Again, I feel like there's not a lot of things in this movie where I can say that they were bad or that I have criticism specifically. It's just more that it was just kind of like, yep, that's this kind of film.
Yeah,
and it was fine, but I wasn't sort of engrossed or enthralled by it.
I liked it. I probably liked it more than you. It says, I think one scene that you would like, though, is with the wife of the sheriff of Nottingham.
I did like that.
Who
yeah.
is the most, if you were going to, the Margaret Rutherford character in the Chaplin movie, which is like, I must say, I find your music to be lovely, and if you come back, you will stay at the mansion house. We would love to show you around here and what we've done with the village, right? And he's just like, yeah, all right, I'll come back and stay at the mansion. It's such a dichotomy between the two of them.
Yeah, and I like that scene because to me, that was the kind of thing where they tell him you're going to meet the wife of the sheriff of Nottingham, and you think, oh, Bob Dylan is going to rip into this like aristocratic doofus or whatever. And he's super charmed by her. And so, as much as he's combative with all these people, she comes in and she's really nice. And she obviously likes him and likes his music. And he's like, cool, I like you.
And it's funny because she just like every time someone else walks in, she's like, I was just saying you should come back and stay at the mansion house. I really think you're wonderful. Someone else walks in. As I was just telling the gentleman, please come and stay at the mansion house. She definitely wants to make sure that they know that she has a mansion house.
Right.
So.
But yeah, I mean, she's this, and in her accent and everything, she's this upper class British stereotype.
But she loves Bob Dylan, which is nice too.
Right. And because of that, he kind of loves her. I mean,
Yeah.
he is very charmed by her. And so I did like that.
I like that too. What about no apostrophe and don't?
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of an affectation. It's fine, I
Yeah.
guess. I don't
Do you know where the title comes from? Don't Look Back.
I think there was like different sort of interpretations, but it was one in particular thing that Pennebaker mentioned. I don't remember.
Satchel Paige, a very famous black pitcher, baseball player. Don't look back, something might be gaining on you. That's his quote.
Yeah, and I can see that as it's the whole idea of Bob Dylan moving things forward, right? As we were just talking
Which
about.
he did.
He's a revolutionary. So should we rate this one
out of 5 mansion houses?
Sure. I was going to say like harmonicas, but that's fine too.
Well, I must say, if you ever come to the mansion house, we can watch this film, which I give 3.5 mansion houses.
I'm not going to attempt any impressions, but I'm going to give it 3 out of 5. So, and I mean, I didn't dislike. I enjoyed it for what it was, and I certainly respect it, and kind of acknowledge the influence of it, but I wasn't fully engaged.
That's cool. I think that's fair.
Yeah. So Dave, how would you rate this?
I'm going with 3.5 mansion houses. I was going to go with 3, but the music is just so damn good. It's like it bumps it up a little bit.
Yeah, the music is good. And I think that's another thing that I'm sort of neutral on the music. So to me, it's like, I can see how it's well-made music, well written and important and whatever, but I'm not like, wow, Bob Dylan music, cool. I'm excited to see that and hear that. So
yeah, Billie Eilish.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was saying Billie Eilish, I have the same sort of attitude about.
She's good too.
Yeah, exactly. That's my feeling on both.
All right.
So we'll come back and talk about the legacy of Don't Look Back. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1967, we've been talking about our documentary pick, Don't Look Back, featuring Bob Dylan. And I mean, of course, the legacy of this movie for Bob Dylan is, Bob Dylan is one of the most important figures in American culture, period. And this movie is like a key element of his importance, I think.
Yeah, it kind of, like we said, went along with the superstarring of him and showcased a very important time right before he went. And I wonder if he knew like he was going to go electric at Newport, and he was like, let me just get this documented before I kind of go in this new direction.
Maybe. I mean, I think as we've established here, there's a lot of careful myth making here, and it wouldn't surprise me if he thought of it that way as well.
I've watched 2 documentaries about the band who, were the Hawks at that point, who was, and they worked together. Songs from Big Pink, they all wrote together in Woodstock, and the band was his backing band, and in Once We're Brothers, Robbie Robertson's talking about how after they went electric, they'd go play and people would like boo them and throw like bottles at them. And like, it was such a, like you said, revolutionary thing for him to go from folk to electric. It's very strange to think of a folk audience so angry.
Well, or of any audience that angry with a change in musical style. I mean, I feel like things are so much more fluid. I mean, not to bring up Taylor Swift again, but I think she's a recent person where was incredibly famous for one style of music and then really changed that style of music a lot. And I'm sure alienated some fans, but at the same time, you wouldn't expect people to throw bottles at Taylor Swift because she's playing pop music instead of country.
Oh, go ahead. Just go. Move on.
All right. You're going to throw a bottle at Taylor Swift?
At you.
Okay. So, well, I know you're a big Scorsese fan. Have you seen his Bob Dylan documentaries that he's made a couple?
Yeah, I never watched No Direction Home, which was actually, the history of that, which is that Pennebaker went back with Dylan in 66 and they filmed that tour. And in his version, Something Is Happening never got released, and who knows if it ever will. But a lot of that footage was used in No Direction Home. And then Dylan has his own version of that documentary, Eat the Document, which is very hard to find. I have not seen that.
Yeah, I have not either. Nor have I seen the Scorsese film. And more recently, Scorsese made the Rolling Thunder review, film, which is, I mean, we're talking about what's real and what's not real or staged in these documentaries. And that has specifically fiction elements that are mixed in with the documentary elements without differentiating between the two, that confused a lot of people at the time. But I didn't see that.
I didn't either. And I mean, I guess I should watch them. I've watched the George Harrison ones from Scorsese, but they just, right. Like once he started doing the Rolling Stone ones, they were like, oh, cool, 4 hours, and it's like, I'll get to it eventually.
Yeah. Well, Scorsese has this whole like sort of parallel career as a documentary filmmaker. I mean, and he's made quite a few, not just music documentaries, but other kinds of documentaries as well.
But the documentarian we're talking about, D.A. Pennebaker, let's talk
Yes.
a little about his legacy, as he is one of the most influential documentarians ever.
He is. And I mean, this is a big reason why, as we keep saying, this is sort of the template that nearly every behind the scenes music documentary follows, all the way through that Billie Eilish movie that I keep mentioning because I happened to see it recently.
It's so sad that you keep bringing it up, Josh. But he, Pennebaker's done some other seminal music documentaries. He did Monterey Pop. I just watched it comes from that. He took Otis Redding, and Monterey Pop is just like kind of like a set list of highlights of all the performers, right? And you usually show one song of each. But in '86, he released Shake, Otis at Monterey. And I watched that before we recorded this. I love Otis Redding, and I've seen some of that footage before. It's electric, man. And I highly recommend that. Pennebaker did The War Room, which is an amazing documentary with his partner Chris Hedges, who's his wife and documentary making partner there, producing partner. That's all about the Bill Clinton campaign to become president. And I think his style there, where he kind of utilizes this hands-off approach, fly on the wall. You really see James Carville and George Stephanopoulos, like, kind of running this campaign in a time before social media, but like really making things modern is really, really interesting. So I would recommend that one. And then he's produced some other ones, startup.com, Kings of Pastry, that I've seen. But I would say go back and watch some of that music stuff and watch The War Room.
Yeah, and I have not seen any of his other films, the major ones or any others. He passed away a few years ago. His final film was an animal rights documentary called Unlocking the Cage in 2016 that nobody seems to care about, but that was the way he making films all the way through the end of his life,
and producing for other documentaries.
Yes, certainly like a mentor for a lot of other documentary filmmakers. And so I haven't seen any of his other films. I have, however, seen the Documentary Now parody versions of The War Room and original cast album Company, which was his documentary about the recording of that.
I watched that this week, and I watched the Documentary Now also on that. But the original cast recording a Company, it's only like 50 minutes, 53 minutes. It's great. I mean, you're seeing how a Broadway but like soundtrack is put together, and it's got Elaine Stritch and she's such a Broadway legend, and you really get that there. And it's interesting because in that one, they work this long, crazy 12-14 hour day, and then they make her sing her big song at the end, and like her voice just isn't there, and you can't blame her on that. So they go through all these takes, and she's so angry at herself, as you see in the documentary.
Yeah, with Paula Pell as that character, which is hilarious.
It is very funny. But then she just comes back and nails it. You should watch that. That's very good, Josh.
Yeah, no, I should. I mean, certainly that, as well as The War Room, are important, influential documentaries. My lack of interest in concert movies, I don't know that I would get much out of watching Monterey Pop.
Can I just throw in Depeche Mode 101, which he co-directed, which I haven't seen since high school. I was going to rewatch it this week, but it's not on any of the digital services.
I wanted to watch that too, but that's considered, again, one of these like precursors to reality TV, because that follows fans as they follow,
right?
The band and everything. I did watch some of his shorts from the 50s also.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot if you have Criterion Channel, or if you have Josh's password to the Criterion Channel.
Equally good.
Yeah, I watched this first short called Daybreak Express, which was about a train line that is shutting down in New York, and it's just very like kind of like there, and you can get lost in it in the background music by Duke Ellington, but get lost in the best possible way. And then the next year he did one called Baby, where it's just following his daughter at the zoo. And it's just nice. It's just, these are good little pieces that kind of show his developing point of view. And then when you get to hear this kind of technique is really, really working.
Yeah, I mean, even though I am not as familiar, I mean, it's clear that he has an important influence and a clear perspective. I think that's a part of what makes this movie work, is that it is crafted with a lot of thought into what to show and what not to show and how to put that together. I have not, Dylan has this sort of weird career also as a movie actor or as creating a few like fiction films. Have you seen Masked and Anonymous or Hearts of Fire, Dylan's starring roles in films?
No, but I should watch. Masked Anonymous was the last 15 years or so, 10 years?
Yeah, it wasn't that. It was 2003, maybe.
Yeah, I did see that one movie where everyone played Bob Dylan. That was weird.
Yeah, the Todd Haynes film.
Yeah, what was that? I'll Be Me or something like that?
No, I'm confusing it with the title of the Joaquin Phoenix movie that you mentioned earlier, because that movie is called, I think the Joaquin Phoenix movie is called I'm Not Here.
Yeah.
And the Dylan movie is maybe called I'm Still Here.
I think you're right.
Yeah, so that's confusing. I did see that one as well, the Todd Haynes movie.
That was weird.
That was weird. But I think Masked and Anonymous and Hearts of Fire are perhaps even weirder. And I have not seen them. But you look on Letterboxd and everything you see there is about how Dylan is possibly like the worst actor you can imagine. And I could see how he would be, even though in this movie, as we keep saying, he's clearly acting to some degree. He's engaging, but he's also, playing a persona. But I could see, especially as he got older and, of course, he's being playful with the press in this movie, but later on, he just didn't talk to the press at all. He almost never does interviews or anything like that anymore.
Yeah, that's true. He's still putting out music, and I know he put out some stuff during the pandemic that was very well regarded.
Yeah, that one, I forget what it's called, but it was like a 17-minute song, I think was his first number one in 30, 40 something years or whatever like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, good for him. He just turned 80. So nice that he's still going. Yeah, I know. Also still going, Donovan. Joan Baez still doing some stuff too.
Donovan's great, dude.
Oh, okay.
I like Donovan. You love Zodiac, and don't they use Hurdy-Gurdy Man?
That's very effective in Zodiac and makes it sound very creepy.
Mellow Yellow, there's a lot of good songs there. Donovan. Season of the Witch, that's a really good song.
That is, and the which is from the George Romero movie Season of the Witch that was written for, which is a great movie and underrated, possibly on the Criterion Channel. Watch it with my password. And parodies of this film, especially of the opening sequence or others. I mean, we talked about Spinal Tap parodying that bit in the corridors where they can't figure out where to go. I've never seen Bob Roberts, the Tim Robbins mockumentary, but I guess that does a lot with this.
Yeah, I think it does. It parodies that kind of sequence and just a bunch of other stuff, like you're saying, Josh.
Yeah, so something like this, I think, when it's such a big part of pop culture, you come to it and the impact is lessened.
And documentary now, in the opening credits, they Don't Look Back's one of the titular movies that they talk about, but they never did a parody of Don't Look Back, did they?
No, they haven't. The opening sequence of documentary now includes some actual documentary clips.
Yes.
But no, they haven't parodied Don't Look Back, but I could see them doing that, and I'm sure they would do. I don't know when that show is coming back, but it is brilliant and
it's
just
pretty fun.
The way it like meticulously recreates the style of so many different kinds of movies is really quite impressive.
What's your favorite one that you've seen?
I don't know. I like their Spalding Gray parody is really funny. And I mean, there's so many of them too, where I haven't, like I said, I've seen the Company parody and the War Room parody, but I haven't seen those movies. But you can still just get so much out of it, and you can tell how carefully they've like recreated these things in this amusing way. So I haven't seen that. It's the Steven Soderbergh Spalding Gray films that they're parodying.
Yeah, Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, and there's another one too. I can't remember what it's called.
It's like War to Cambodia.
Swimming to Cambodia. Yeah.
So.
But yeah, that's a great show. And if they did do a Don't Look Back parody, I'm sure it would be wonderful. So yeah, and then just the music video in general. I mean,
right? Am I correct? I have this memory of that In Excess video where Michael Hutchins is doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's been influenced by this thing.
Yes.
I have to imagine Weird Al did it at some point.
I'm sure he did. Yeah. I can't see him not. I mean, he had that great Bob Dylan parody song that's like 11 minutes long or something. That's just him doing palindromes in his Bob Dylan impression. That's very funny. And in part is funny because it just keeps going and going. And it's one of those jokes where you're like, it's funny. And then it's like not funny. And then it's funny again, just because he keeps doing it for so long. Right. Yeah. Because he
pushed to that level.
Exactly. So anything else on the legacy here you want to mention, Jason?
We should mention that Pennebaker also was not just a master with the camera, but also with the actual technical aspects. He created a portable 16 millimeter camera with sound recording system, and that kind of revolutionized things and made it so you could record stuff like this. And I think that's it for me on this one, Josh. I liked it and you liked it all right, but we both recognized just how important it was. Bob Dylan, the only other artist besides him to sell out De Montfort Hall in Leicester in the 1960s, the Beatles.
Well, clearly. I thought you were going to say something unexpected, like, I don't know what, but the Beatles,
Taylor Swift.
Well, in the 1960s, I don't think so.
That would be unexpected.
That would be quite unexpected and
I feel like Josh likes Taylor Swift a lot more than Jason here.
Well, I mean, my point isn't even about whether I like Taylor Swift. It's just that she's really famous right now.
I don't dislike Taylor Swift at all. I just find it weird that that's Josh's constant reference point to Bob Dylan.
Well, I mean, or Billie Eilish.
Those are the two. Go. Which is the better documentary of those two?
I haven't seen the Taylor Swift one actually, and the Billie Eilish one is okay. It's way too long. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes long, and it doesn't need to be that long.
Yeah, I mentioned the two on the band that I watched, which Once Were Brothers, which is Robbie Robertson's answer to kind of like smooth out his legacy from the Levon Helm one, Ain't In It For My Health, which is an amazing piece. One of my favorite music documentaries.
Yeah, like I said, I'm just not particularly keen on these films. And even when they make them about artists that I really love, I just kind of shrug. I remember watching Cameron Crowe's Pearl Jam documentary, and Pearl Jam probably my favorite musical artist of all time. And it was like, I could have done without it.
Well, then I'm really glad we picked this for this episode.
Oh, it was a good discussion. It's a worthwhile movie, even if I wasn't thrilled with it. It's certainly worth seeing. It's on HBO Max as well as Criterion.
Yeah, I like it, man. It's a good piece.
Good stuff. So that is Don't Look Back, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can check us out on social media.
You can. I'm Jason Harris Comedy, Facebook, Instagram, J Harris Comedy, Twitter. Go for Jason.com. Invented in 1967, maybe? Who knows?
Don't look back at that website.
There you go. So you probably would be better off listening to all of Taylor Swift's music than going on that site. We're at awesomemovieyear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter.
I am at joshbellhateseverything.com, at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, and at Signal Bleed on Twitter. And check out our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. And every once in a while, I squeeze in a plug for Wax Trax Records. With Bob Dylan, you can come find some of the most rare and hard to find Bob Dylan stuff. So here's a good place for that.
Hey, and I'm going to plug Piecing It Together because Dave and I have been for about 6 months been doing a preview episode, all the movie trailers coming out. Every month we talk about what's coming out, what we feel has influenced them, what we kind of think the movies are going to be like, and then we go back and talk about the movies we saw from the last month that we covered. So
if you want more Jason, listen,
and more Dave,
that's right. Listen to Piecing It Together.
Everybody but more Josh.
Well, I'm on it occasionally, but not on those monthly episodes.
Oh, okay.
All sorts of great people on Piecing It Together,
and Taylor Swift.
Not yet.
Not yet, but
we'll see.
Happen.
You never know.
Yeah. All right.
What is in our next episode,
Josh? It's your pick, and I'm going to let you tell it to everyone. But first, I should mention, Josh, connecting it to this episode, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen. The title of this movie is the title of a Bruce Springsteen song.
I did not know that. The movie is John Boorman's thriller Point Blank is my pick. So tune in next time for that. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.